Hello everyone, Silently here, and welcome back to another episode of Truly Bedrock Season 0. It is episode 15, of course, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different than normal. We're going to be doing like a tutorial let's play for how to actually raid the end cities on the Bedrock edition. This is something that you guys requested a couple of episodes ago, as we need to like restock our Elytra shop. And I may as well go ahead and share my knowledge of raiding end cities and all of that stuff with you guys, as I have raided hundreds of end cities and fought hundreds of dragons, so hopefully you guys can learn some valuable tips and tricks from this. Now, I've never really done like a tutorial let's play kind of deal before, so hopefully this turns out well. Be sure to let me know, like your feedback for this in the comment section down below if you do end up enjoying this, or maybe getting some use out of this, then consider leaving a like as well. But I guess with all of that stuff out of the way, we should probably just hop into it. So for this little tutorial, I'm not actually going to be using any of my maxed out enchanted diamond gear or my Elytra or anything like that. I'm going to be going in with the most basic iron gear that I can find and the most basic tools, weapon, and armor that I can find as well. That way, it's basically like it's my first time in the end dimension, and for those of you that are going into the end dimension for the first time, you can actually know what to bring. And yeah, for those of you that aren't going into the end dimension for the first time, then you'll be much more prepared, and that'll be great. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a really basic bow, just with infinity and some punch on it, and power as well, and that's really all you need. Make sure it's got infinity though. A bow is going to be really useful, and the rest of my armor is pretty basic. It doesn't really matter what you have on it. As long as you have some feather falling 4, you'll be doing pretty good. Honestly, feather falling 4 might even be OP, but this is just like all I got. This is my most basic iron gear that I can find. This is actually the most basic sword that I can find as well. But really just bring whatever you have, and the most basic pickaxe I can find does actually have Silk Touch on it, which is actually extremely useful. If you have the resources, bring a basic Silk Touch iron pickaxe with you. So that's really all there is for our gear. As you can see, it's all pretty basic. You don't really need that much stuff. Of course, make sure you have an arrow on you for your bow, a little bit of wood, maybe an ender chest if you can. Ender chest is really useful, and also a water bucket to get rid of the pesky enderman. That is also pretty mandatory as well. But that is all there is for the gear. What else are we going to be taking with us into the end dimension? Well, I went ahead and brewed up way more slow falling potions than I could ever use. Basically, you want to bring a few of these because they're really useful when you're fighting in the end cities, because you're not going to fall to your death or anything. And when you're pillaring across the void, if you do fall off into the void, you'll fall really slowly. You'll be able to throw an ender pearl, and it's totally a lifesaver. You definitely want to have some slow falling potions with you if you can get them. Now, the other things that we're going to be bringing with us is a couple stacks of cobblestone to like bridge across there and just have some blocks. I also brought a bunch of rockets for when we eventually get another Elytra. I brought another 2 water buckets so that we can have an infinite water source in case we ruin this one, and a ton of food. You definitely want to make sure you have a lot of food with you. If you do run out of food, you can break the chorus plants and eat those. However, that's not really the funnest thing ever. Bring a couple of ender pearls if you can, and also blaze rods. Blaze rods are actually really useful. And why is that, you might ask? Well, if you accidentally break your ender chest without Silk Touch, of course, that is going to turn into a whole bunch of obsidian, and that is not great. So once that's in obsidian form, if you have some more ender pearls with you, you can make some Eyes of Ender, and once you have Eyes of Ender, you can of course remake your ender chest. And the final few things that we're going to be bringing with us is of course a stack of logs. So that is just really useful for crafting tables, for slabs, for making chests. Once you actually get shulker shells, you can make more shulker boxes. And you also want to bring a little bit of iron with you as well. That way, in case your pickaxes break, you can make a few more using your logs, of course, and that way you never run out of blocks and actually get stranded out there without any way to get home. So definitely bring a little bit of iron, bring your blocks, bring your wood as well, and the rest of this is totally useful. Now, if you don't have shulker boxes to begin with, that is totally fine. Just fill up as many slots in your ender chest with useful things as you can, and you'll be good to go. As you can see, I took everything that wasn't really useful to me out of my ender chest, and what I'm hoping we'll be able to do in this episode is fill it up with other useful things and gear from the end dimension. And here we are at the stronghold and the end portal as well, and there's a couple things that we want to do here before we actually go into the end. We want to set up a little bit of like a room to respawn in, and because there are some beds in Bedrock Edition, bugs, not beds, you don't want to use white beds. These guys will strand you on the surface or not actually set your spawn point. They're totally broken. And even if you do use a non-white bed, then, you know, it might not work. It might plant you on the surface when you respawn. So another thing you're going to want is like a hole going up to the surface, so that if you respawn on the surface, you can drop back down into the water pool and you'll be good to go. A couple of infinite water sources is also a good thing to have here as well. And I'm pretty sure that set my spawn point, didn't it? Yes, it did. Also, having an ender chest is a good thing too, and maybe just a little bit of backup storage for gear or whatever you want. Ideally, we won't be dying or falling into the void, but it's always good to have a backup plan and be able to respawn here if you do die. So once you got all that stuff ready to go, it is time to hop into the end dimension. So now that we're in the end dimension, I want to go ahead and make a little poor man's ender, and that's basically just a 2-block tall roof above your head, and with 1 block where they can actually get underneath that roof. And what we're going to do now is just kind of look at all these guys, and they will always walk into this hole as it's the closest one to us. And once they're in there, they're extremely easy to like hit and collect all the ender pearls as well. And I'm just going to try and get as many ender pearls as I can, preferably like a couple of stacks. That way we have some ender pearls to go around. And if you have mending gear, this is also like the best way to actually mend your stuff. Now, one thing I have kind of forgot to mention is carved pumpkins. A lot of people say that you should wear these on your head to avoid looking at Enderman, but look how terrible that is. Even if you turn off your HUD, it's still there. So what you need to do if you're wearing one of these is just operate fully in a third person, which is a thing that we can do, but I don't really want to. These guys are looking at me like I'm weird. Why are you wearing a pumpkin? I'm asking myself the same question, man. Oh, he's still teleported away. I don't know if I trust this thing. Anyway, what you would normally do from here to actually get out to the outer in-city islands is go through one of those gateways. However, in Bedrock 1.9, those things are totally broken and I would not suggest going through those at all. So we're going to completely bypass that entire thing and instead use an ice bridge going out there. Now, I recently did a tutorial on this ice bridge, and it is currently like one of the best ways out there. Oh god, this is so terrible. I don't like pumpkins at all. Okay, so since I have this ice road, I'm basically just gonna hop in the boat and just kind of travel out there as far as I can get going. Now, I did pick up an Enderman. Apparently he's gonna be able to hit me. That's totally fine. This road goes out about 1,000 blocks until we actually hit the in-city islands. But we should be approaching the end of this road sometime soon. There we go. There's my other boat. And cool. What I'm gonna do from here is just kind of hop out of there. And then we're just gonna kind of bridge up to these in-city islands, and from here, we need to figure out how we're actually gonna find our first in-city. So I made myself a little safe area on top of this in-city island, and now what we need to do is actually find the actual in-cities. And now there's 3 ways that you can do this. The first is the most boring and I guess legit with air quotes way, and that is to basically just kind of wander around aimlessly on these islands until you find one. That is a very, very slow, very tedious, and very boring way of doing it, but it is the most air quote legit way to do it. So if you want to go about that route, basically find yourself the biggest landmass that you can and just kind of keep on walking along that that landmass. You don't really want to bridge across the void if you don't have to, but sometimes you will, and that's really all I can say for you. You're just going to be walking for a while. So if you don't like wandering around aimlessly and you just so happen to be playing in single player, lucky for you, what you can do is go ahead and go to your video settings and then basically just crank your render distance all the way to whatever your maximum is. I can go up to 80 chunks, and that really reveals pretty much every in-city within about 1,000 blocks. And that is just extremely useful. Even if this lags you out momentarily, you'll at least be able to find out where the in-cities are and then go ahead and turn down your render distance and then go raid the end city once you actually walk over to it. So it's a pretty useful tactic if you're playing on single player. So if you're not playing in single player, if you're playing on like a realm or your friend's world or whatever, then I have one more option for you. Now this one does require you to have the world seed of the world that you're actually playing on, but as long as you have that seed, you can find out a lot of where your end cities are. So this is a creative like copy just using the same world as truly Bedrock, and I went ahead and I just teleported to where I am currently on the server. And now that I'm here, I can either crank up my render distance, of course, or what I can do if I don't have, large render distance for whatever reason, is I can go and use /locate and then do end city. And that'll give me the, location of the nearest end city. So the nearest one to me currently on the server is at -568, -1896. So let's teleport there. Because coordinates and things don't show up in chat as you're typing commands, what I did is just wrote out the teleport command before typing in the / and now we can teleport there. And as you can see, we're clearly inside of an end city. It's a very tiny, minuscule one, probably not even worth raiding. It doesn't have a ship, and there's really not going to be that many shulkers or much loot here, but as you can see, this kind of tactic does work, and it does work for finding end cities. Now, if you do have the world seed and you don't feel like firing up a creative copy for whatever reason, what you can do is also use a website like Chunkbase. They have the end city finder. Now, currently it's not fully compatible with the Bedrock edition, but it's good enough to show you where the actual end cities are. So go ahead and put in your world seed, of course, put in the location of where you're currently standing in the end dimension, and all of the little dots on the map will actually show you where all of the end cities are relative to you. You can go there, see if there's an end city. If there isn't, you can move on to the next one. If there is, then congrats, you got yourself an easy, free end city. I'd also like to point out that these end cities generate in a pretty rough little grid. So if you find one, if you keep going in a cardinal direction, you'll likely hit another one reasonably soon. And that is pretty much it. As you can see, this one here is in direct line with that one. That one over there is even lined up with this. And then if we go like north from here, you can see that there's even another one. So generally going in a cardinal direction once you find an end city isn't a bad idea. And those are pretty much all of the ways that I know of that are the best ways to actually find end cities in your world. So hopefully you have the world seed and you'll actually be able to use a website like Chunkbase or similar things using either creative and high render distance or whatever you want. And it honestly makes finding end cities pretty easy. Now, if you are playing on a realm and you don't know the world seed, this is going to be a pretty painful process because the render distance on realms is actually extremely small in the end dimension. Like, it is seriously minuscule. There could be a massive city right over there and I would have absolutely no idea. So hopefully for your sake, you actually have the coordinates. If you don't, again, I'm sorry, it's gonna be a little while of wandering around. Beg your server owner. Oh, hey, look at that, massive end city. We couldn't even see it until we got close to it. Perfect example. So now we need to actually get over to our first end city, and typically what you'll need to do is kind of bridge across there. Now with Bedrock, because mobile players play, we actually have this nice little feature of being able to place blocks mid-air, and what you want to do is wait until you hear the block placing sound of them placing. Otherwise, they could disappear, you'll fall in the void. I also highly recommend making 2 wide bridges because I've made 1 wide bridges before. I've heard the block placing sound, it's placed, and I've still fallen in the void. So if you stand right in between these 2 blocks, you won't have any issues. And once you get close enough to the island, you feel confident enough, you can of course throw an Ender Pearl. Ender Pearl's very nice to have. But now we're here at our first end city, and we can go ahead and actually start fighting some shulkers and getting ourselves a ton of loot. So if we're being honest, these guys are honestly not too big of a deal. As long as you keep kind of strafing back and forth, you won't have any issues actually hitting them. Also keep in mind that the little spitballs that they shoot at you can actually be broken with your sword, or you can shoot them with a bow. And speaking of a bow is actually surprisingly useful at this point in the game. As of 1.9, the shulkers don't actually have a loot table, so looting affects them like literally not at all. So you might as well go ahead and just kill them however you want to, and they'll always drop the same amount of shulker shells. Very, very convenient. Now, another little tip for you, if you're not aware, these staircases are actually just missing about half the slabs in them. So if you go ahead and place these slabs, they're actually really easy to actually, walk up. And now we get to our first little intersection. We're gonna go ahead and pop that thing. Maybe we won't pop that thing, but this makes a perfect opportunity to actually float up to this upper area and kind of just wreck this guy real quick. So we'll go ahead and punch him in the face. But now we have two options. We can go that route with all those guys, get rid of that thing, or we can go this route with a whole big tower. So I'm just gonna decide to go this way because no particular reason. And what I wanna do is I wanna place a couple of blocks right here just to mark off this way, because these cities look extremely similar to each other. So if you put some marker blocks on the walkways that you've gone and explored, you'll know to not go that way again, as you've already gone that way. So it looks like we should have some loot chests, maybe not, but we'll be able to walk up here. I'm just gonna go ahead and go this way. It's just always the way that I go to get to these shulkers. And as you can see, these guys are not that big of a deal. This guy hasn't even noticed me yet, so we'll go ahead and wipe him out as well, get rid of these little spitballs, and we got ourselves a few more shulker shells. Now at this point, if these are your first shulker shells, I highly recommend making yourself a shulker box and putting all of your gear inside that shulker box and leaving that shulker box in your ender chest. Anything that you don't absolutely need, put inside your ender chest. In case you die or fall in the void, you will not regret it. And now we get to the fun part. So we're about to tackle one of these giant cylindrical tower things, and there are tons of shulkers everywhere in here. Now, because in 1.9 these guys don't have loot tables, you could literally just sit here and pelt these guys with your bow, and they'll drop the same amount of shulker shells as they would if you killed them with looting 3. But I'm not gonna go ahead and do that. What I'm gonna do is block off all of this right here so we don't fall down all the way down to the bottom. Also put a block down in the center and break that block right there so we can actually walk up in there. Now this part, you very well might die because there's a lot of these guys, but we're gonna go ahead and just kind of run around quickly. These spitballs are honestly pretty slow, but as long as we only get hit by a couple of those, we'll be fine. And we're just gonna kind of take out these guys as we go up this tower. Our objective is to get to the very top right here and then just kind of hide in this corner. As you can see, that's a pretty easy thing to do. And then once you're up here, their spitballs won't really be able to hurt you, and we can go ahead and get this loot chest. Now, because these things normally spawn with diamond gear in them, you might actually get yourself a better armor than what you're currently wearing, and no shame if you want to go ahead and put that on before actually taking care of the rest of these shulkers. And from up here, you can go ahead and take more pot shots at them, or you can kind of drop down on top of these guys even, because you can stand on top of them, kill them, drop down even further, and get more shulker shells as you go. Another thing that you can do is kind of soften these guys up with a couple shots from your bow, and then go in for the kill with your looting sword if you're playing in an update where they actually drop more shells with looting. So keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that these little like end rods and slabs going around the edge actually make a spiral going all the way up. They're great for walking down, they're terrible for going up, so don't worry about ever going up using these. I'm not sure if a single person in Minecraft has ever actually used these to go up the end cities. Like, I can't even make that first jump. So yeah, just pillar up to the top if you need to. But once you've cleared out this room, there's always going to be at least the room at the top, if not more like walkways going off to the sides. So from here, you kind of want to just keep on spreading out, going to these little rooms, and kind of just tackling all these guys. I would suggest not really worrying about the shulkers that are on the undersides of the bridges and stuff. Those guys can waste a lot of your time, and that time is better spent exploring. Now that being said, the ones on the little platforms and the ones on the sides of the towers that have a floor underneath them, they're totally worth going for because their shells are just gonna drop down on a platform and they're really easy to get. So these guys, go ahead and get them. They're pretty easy pickings. So you found your first ender chest. Congrats. I would go ahead and throw literally everything inside of this. Like right now, I'm gonna go ahead and make another crafting table and churn these 2 chests that I looted into more shulker boxes, and basically just throw literally everything that is not absolutely mandatory into these shulker boxes. So all of this purple stuff, all of these like coarse fruits and iron and stuff, I don't really need any of that stuff on me. I'm gonna throw it in there. So once you get done raiding your end city, I would suggest going back down to the bottom little entrance area, and again, just offload everything that you do not need on you. If it's not mandatory, get rid of it. The only exception to this rule is maybe like some blocks to pillar with, because you're probably never going to end up building with these anyway, so you might as well use them for pillaring, but everything else you can go ahead and put away in your ender chest. And it looks like we found our first ever end gateway. Now, of course, these ones are very like tempting, aren't they? I mean, I don't know if they're actually broken in this update, the return gateways. I know the ones on the main island are broken. So if you want to, just go ahead and mark down the coordinates of it. It's worth at least knowing where they are. Well, I found another one, but it's absolutely minuscule, and I already rated it, and there's really not much to say about this one besides that I got one shulker shell from this entire one, and so these tiny ones probably are not worth your time at all. So we finally got ourselves a pretty decently sized end city, and if you can see that little, like, you know, gateway thing up there on the top, that means that we have ourselves a ship. It's not quite in the render distance right now because realms, but there it is. So we just gotta make our way up there and then we can get ourselves our first ever elytra. After battling through the city, I finally made it up to the gateway and now we're at the ship. And this is kind of like the first time I've ever seen the ship not be centered with this gateway. That's a little bit strange. Normally what you can do if it's perfectly centered is throw an ender pearl artfully and hit that pillar. Now, if you're not great with ender pearling, I wouldn't suggest that, but if you line it up perfectly, you shouldn't have too big of a deal. You can also, of course, just bridge across. So the first thing that I always do when I get here is go after this guy. He's, of course, just going to teleport down and be a little butt, because of course he is. Yeah, no, oh, there he is. Hi. And then once I get down in here, I kind of go to the left of that pillar as that blocks their line of sight. But now we finally got ourselves the elytra and a couple of loot chests as well. Looks like we got a pretty good pickaxe. I'll take that. And a few more diamonds to boot. Fantastic. So now that we have ourselves the elytra, finding more end cities and doing a lot more raiding is going to be a very, very easy process. Another thing that you could have done, if this is like your first time going to the end and getting elytras, is maybe go ahead and bring an anvil and a mending and unbreaking book, as then you can actually enchant your elytra fully and do a ton more exploring, because these things don't have that much durability by default. So that is pretty much all there is to getting the elytra. Of course, there is still one more thing on this ship that you want, and that is the dragon head. To get this, you want to just kind of crouch as you're going out here and put a couple blocks underneath that thing, and make sure you always got room in your inventory, and then you can just punch that and grab it, and that is pretty much all there is to it. So now that we have ourselves an elytra, I'm gonna go ahead and just plop mine on and also grab out some fireworks as well. Now, before I ever start flying in the end dimension, especially on a realm, especially on a bedrock, I'm gonna drink a slow falling potion because lag really likes to kill you in this game, and this is where the slow falling potions really come in handy quite a lot. So I know because I looked in creative that there is no other cities with, like, just in general, within about 2,000 blocks. So I need to head to positive 690 by negative 1900. And this is always a very scary experience, as the fog in the end dimension, especially on a realm, is just minuscule for flying. And you just really can't see anything. So I'm gonna try and stick to the ground, but stick about 50 or so blocks above it in case anything bad happens. Now, when I'm flying, I always try to stay over some sort of land, even if it's just these little things in case like the game crashes or something. But here you go, as you can see, we found ourselves the next end city, and I think that's probably the closest I have ever seen an end ship to the ground. Look at that. Weird, but I'll take it. Oh, hi, Enderman. Apparently I got too close to the ground, but I don't think anyone else has been here, so we can go ahead and get ourselves a second elytra. And because I have already a pretty good amount of shulker shells, okay, pro tip, get your water bucket out. Because I already have enough shulker shells, I don't really need to worry about getting more of those. So from here on out, I'm gonna focus on mainly grabbing all of the loot and all of the elytras from the cities that I visit. And I'm gonna tell you guys exactly where all of the loot in the end cities always is. So this is going to be the next city that we raid, and basically what we're going to be doing with this one is going through and just getting the loot chest, the ender chest, and the elytra as well. So raiding so many of these, I pretty much know exactly where all the loot chests and these things are, and it's really not too hard to find them either. So for instance, these big cylindrical rooms right here always have a couple of loot chests and the very top of them. Now I have slow falling, so it makes this really interesting, but basically what you can do is just waltz on in here and just take basically all the diamonds, all the diamond swords, and just all of the good stuff from here. Leave behind the beetroots because nobody ever cares about those. And that is pretty much it for the cylindrical ones. Super easy. I mean, they even put a staircase for you to get it. And from there, these little ones that like are just on the edge that are 2 layers tall, they don't really ever have anything in them. However, these ones that are 3 layers tall over here with the towers on top, those ones have a chance to actually have some chests and an ender chest in them as well, and that is extremely convenient. So what I do is I normally just break through the ceiling right here, and this one doesn't have anything. However, it could have had something, as you can tell from those end rods. So we can move on from that one to this next 3 tall one over here, and I might just look in through the windows. Nothing in that one either, what a shame. So that was pretty much it for the loot from this end city. So let's just hop over to the end ship and kind of get our elytra, shall we? Swoop on in here, kill this shulker, and just take all of the loot and the elytra. So to recap, the only rooms in the end cities with loot chests are these big cylindrical ones. There's always 2 loot chests at the very top boxy area, and from there, the only other loot chests will be found in these 3-layered tall rooms, and these ones should always generate with loot in them. However, apparently on Bedrock it only happens sometimes, but it's still worth poking your head in there to find out. So this is going to be my last little end city that I raid, and I say little because this is literally the smallest one that you can pretty much get. They're cute and tiny, but I have probably raided about 20 or so end cities, and I got over 4 shulker boxes full of loot. No idea how many elytras I have, but I know it's a ton. So now I need to find myself an in-city gateway, and basically what you need to look for is little glowing areas on like the ground. That's pretty much all there is to it. Eventually, if you do generate like a new one, you'll actually see the beacon beam, but that isn't really like fully reliable. I also need to be careful because my elytra is getting down to about half health, but hopefully I can find one of these gateways. I am about 7,000 blocks out by now, so I have traveled quite far, and I think there's actually some bugs where they don't generate super far out in the end dimension. Oh hi, I didn't know about this one. Is there really another ship right here? Because that would just be lovely. There is. Wow, that was actually fully accidental. Cool, I guess we'll get one more elytra on camera. This will be probably our like 10th elytra or so. Too many. So I'm about 100 blocks away from where I last recorded, and there is another end city right here, but the thing that I really care about is the gateway. Now, of course, I just looked at an Enderman, so that guy's gonna chase me until I get over here. But yeah, as you can see, we got ourselves a gateway. Now, if you can't find yourself a gateway, what you can do is kind of just chuck all of your stuff into an ender chest, and it just kind of hop into the void. That is a thing that is actually surprisingly like easy to do, and I do it kind of a lot when I'm raiding the end dimension because these gateways are really hard to find. But of course, make sure that you dump everything that you can into your ender chest, your armor, and everything like that. We just need to kind of chuck a pearl through there, and we are back at the main island. Yay! And we can finally hop through to the overworld. And this is what I mean by spawning on the surface. Yeah, I just jumped out of the portal and landed back on the surface. Luckily this time, I actually have materials and wood on me. I don't need to go searching for 3 hours to find some trees. And yeah, definitely having a hole down to your stronghold is a good idea, because as you can recall, this is where I slept. So after about 5 hours in the end dimension, pretty much my entire set of armor is battered and beaten. All my tools are nearly on the brink of death as well, especially that sword. And I ended up not using about half of the potions, which is good. It's always good to have more things than you need when in the end dimension. And it was really nice to have all of this as backup gear as well in case something did go awry. But I got pretty lucky early on with the loot from the end cities, so I didn't need most of this. However, again, it is really nice to have all of this just like there and available. And of course, we got ourselves a 52 shulker shells. That's not too bad considering that looting has no effect on these guys, and I didn't even really have any looting to begin with. We also got ourselves all of the nice valuables in this chest here, 43 diamonds, 21 emeralds, and some dragon heads to boot. Pretty nice haul there. So we have ourselves a full shulker box entirely full of diamond gear, and there's a lot of really nice enchanted things in here. Pretty much perfect gear. This is really nice to have for everyone on the server. We also got a bunch more diamond gear in here and a ton of iron stuff as well. A whole nother shulker box of iron gear. Gonna sell all of that in our shop. And finally, we got ourselves 13 elytras. That kind of like loot and run kind of tactic for dealing with the end cities works very well if you actually have the world seed, because you can go through and raid a ton of cities really quickly and just get a ton of elytras. So hopefully you all get a ton of use out of my tips and tricks that I showed in this video. So that is going to do it for this tutorial let's play episode kind of deal. I hope you all get a ton of use out of this in your worlds and can have a much better time just raiding the end dimension and getting a lot more loot out of the end, and hopefully not die as much in the end dimension as well. If you have any tips or tricks of your own that you would like to share with us, then please do let us know in the comment section down below. That would be awesome to see what you guys do on your end raids. And if you liked this episode and maybe want to see more of them in the future, then of course leave a like on the video. That is the thing to do on YouTube. It helps out the video, helps out the channel, and helps out this series as well. So thank you very much for doing so. And if you guys are new here, consider subscribing as well so you don't miss the next episode of this series. But I'll see you all down in the comment section and in the next one. Thank you again for watching. And then there was silence.